The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Chen stepped forward. The human looked small compared to the towering Vraxian warriors and the massive Keltorian diplomats that filled the Great Hall. Chen carried a simple cloth bag, the kind humans used for groceries back on Earth. The other species watched with barely concealed amusement. "The Council has decided," announced High Arbiter Zexthor, his crystalline body refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns across the walls. "Humanity's application for military alliance status is denied. Your species lacks the necessary martial capabilities to contribute to the defense of civilized space." Chen nodded slowly, as if expecting this response. "May I ask what specifically concerns the Council?" A Vraxian general rose, his forearms gesturing dismissively. "Your weapons are primitive, your ships are slow, your soldiers are weak, but most damning is your complete lack of innovation in warfare. Every species in this chamber has developed energy weapons, plasma cannons, quantum disruptors. What do humans bring? Chemical propellants and metal projectiles. It's embarrassing." "I see," Chen said quietly. He reached into his cloth bag and pulled out a simple rubber band. It was yellow, unremarkable, the kind that might hold together a bundle of papers. He held it up for all to see. "General Krathtok, what is your assessment of this item?" The Vraxian general's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "It's refuse. Elastic polymer with no practical combat application. This proves our point exactly." Chen stretched the rubber band between his fingers, testing its tension. "On Earth, we had a saying, 'Necessity is the mother of invention.' We also had another saying, 'If it's stupid but it works, it isn't stupid.'" He released one end of the rubber band, and it snapped across the chamber. It was a pointless gesture, traveling maybe 10 meters before falling harmlessly to the floor. Several species representatives made sounds that their translators rendered as laughter. "Ambassador Chen," Zexthor said, his tone almost pitying, "perhaps it would be best if humanity focused on trade and cultural exchange rather than military matters." Chen smiled, but there was something in that smile that made a few of the more perceptive beings in the chamber pause. "I understand the Council's position. However, I would like to propose a demonstration. Allow me to show what humans can do with seemingly useless items. If I fail to impress, we'll withdraw our application permanently. If I succeed, the Council will reconsider." The representatives murmured among themselves. Finally, Zexthor spoke. "What do you propose?" "A simple test. The Council provides items they deem completely useless for combat. I'll demonstrate human ingenuity. No weapons, no advanced technology, just human creativity and whatever materials you provide." Krathtok laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "This will be entertaining at least." "Very well, human. You have your demonstration." The challenge was scheduled for the following day at the Council's training facility. Chen returned to the small human delegation quarters, where Captain Sarah Park waited with the rest of the team. Park was a military advisor, a veteran of Earth's various conflicts, and she looked concerned. "Did they go for it?" she asked. Chen nodded, setting down his bag. "They did. We have 24 hours. "What exactly are you planning?" asked Dr. James Kim, the delegation's science officer. Chen pulled out his personal data pad and began making notes. "They're going to give us items they consider useless. Our job is to prove that in human hands, anything can become dangerous." Park leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You know they're setting us up to fail, right? They'll pick the most ridiculous items possible." "I'm counting on it," Chen said. "The more useless they think something is, the more impressive it'll be when we weaponize it." The next morning, the training facility was packed. Word of the humans' challenge had spread throughout the diplomatic quarter, and representatives from dozens of species had come to watch. The facility itself was massive, designed to accommodate various gravitational and atmospheric requirements. The section designated for the demonstration was a standard gravity environment, roughly 200 meters long and 100 meters wide. Krathtok stood at the center, surrounded by tables loaded with items. Chen and his team approached, and the humans' eyes widened slightly at the collection before them. There were harmless household items from various species: decorative plants, eating utensils, children's toys, art supplies, cleaning materials, and construction debris. Nothing that could conventionally be considered a weapon. "These are your materials, human," Krathtok announced, his voice booming across the facility. "You may not modify them with any technology beyond simple hand tools. You have 2 hours to prepare, then you will face 3 of my warriors in simulated combat. They will use training weapons set to stun. You may use whatever you create from these items. If you can defeat even one of my warriors, we will consider your demonstration successful." Chen walked along the tables, his team following. He picked up items at random: a roll of plastic sheeting, some wooden dowels, a container of liquid soap, several balls of string, a handful of marbles, some aluminum foil, a spray bottle, and various other odds and ends. To the watching aliens, he seemed to be selecting items at random. "2 hours starting now," Zexthor announced. Chen and his team moved to a preparation area. The watching crowd expected frantic activity, but instead, Chen sat down and began to think. Park and Kim waited, knowing better than to interrupt. Finally, after 5 minutes of silence, Chen spoke. "Okay, here's what we're going to do." He began sorting items into categories: projectiles, obstacles, distractions, and force multipliers. "Kim, you're on chemistry. Anything here we can combine for useful effects." "Park, you're on physics and engineering. I need delivery systems. I'll handle strategy and integration." They worked with quiet efficiency. Kim mixed the liquid soap with water in specific ratios, creating a solution that was incredibly slippery. He then found some powder used in Keltorian art that, when mixed with a different liquid, created a thick foam that expanded rapidly. Park took the wooden dowels and string, creating a simple tension device. She tested rubber bands from Earth supplies, measuring their force. The marbles went into small cloth pouches that could be swung or thrown. Chen focused on the plastic sheeting, cutting it into strips and shapes with a simple knife from the toolkit they'd been provided. He fashioned several items that looked like nothing special to the observers, but Park and Kim understood immediately. They were traps, snares, and obstacles designed to take advantage of the Vraxian warriors' anatomy and combat style. The Vraxians were quadrupedal, with their weapons held in their upper arms. They were fast and strong, but their joints bent in specific ways, and their balance depended on their 4 legs working in coordination. Chen's preparations took all of this into account. As the 2 hours drew to a close, the human team had assembled what looked like a collection of pranks rather than weapons. There were tripwires made of string, pouches filled with marbles, bottles of soapy water, strips of plastic sheeting arranged in specific patterns, and several wooden contraptions that resembled nothing so much as children's toys. "Time is up," Zexthor announced. "Let the demonstration begin." 3 Vraxian warriors entered the arena. They wore light armor and carried stun batons, weapons that would incapacitate without permanent harm. They moved with the confidence of apex predators, spreading out to surround the human team's position. The crowd watched with anticipation. Many had placed bets on how quickly the humans would fall. Chen stood at the center of his prepared area, Park and Kim flanking him. He held what looked like a simple slingshot made from a Y-shaped piece of wood and a rubber band. In his other hand was a pouch of marbles. "Whenever you're ready, General," Chen called out. Krathtok gave the signal, and his warriors charged. They moved fast, covering ground with surprising speed. The first warrior reached the edge of Chen's prepared zone and immediately stepped on a strip of plastic sheeting that had been coated with the soap solution. His legs shot out from under him, and he crashed down hard. The crowd gasped. The second warrior adjusted course, leaping over the fallen first. But Park had anticipated this. She activated a simple tension release on one of the wooden contraptions, and a strip of plastic sheeting snapped upward, catching the warrior across his visual sensors. Blinded and disoriented, he stumbled directly into a tripwire. The wire was connected to several pouches filled with marbles, which swung down and struck his legs. The marbles scattered across the floor, creating an unstable surface. The warrior's legs splayed, and he went down. The third warrior slowed, approaching more cautiously. Chen raised his slingshot and fired a marble. It wasn't aimed at the warrior directly, but at the ground just in front of him. The marble bounced unpredictably, and the warrior's eyes tracked it instinctively. In that moment of distraction, Kim triggered the foam trap. The rapidly expanding substance erupted from a concealed container, engulfing the warrior's legs and hardening quickly enough to immobilize him. The entire engagement had lasted less than 30 seconds. 3 elite Vraxian warriors had been defeated by rubber bands, soap, marbles, and plastic sheeting. The training facility was absolutely silent. Chen lowered his slingshot and walked to the center of the arena. "General Krathtok, I believe we've met the challenge requirements." The general stared at the scene before him. His warriors were struggling to free themselves, one slipping repeatedly on the soap, another tangled in string and marbles, the third trapped in rapidly hardening foam. It was absurd. It was embarrassing. It was also undeniably effective. Zexthor descended from his observation platform. His crystalline form seemed to pulse with different colors, indicating deep thought. "Ambassador Chen, I must confess this was not what I expected." "That's rather the point, High Arbiter," Chen replied. "Human warfare has never been about having the best technology or the strongest soldiers. It's about adaptation, creativity, and the willingness to use whatever is available. You asked what humans could contribute to the defense of civilized space. The answer is simple. We can teach you to see weapons where you see only trash. We can show you that the difference between a tool and a weapon is simply a matter of application and intent." Krathtok approached, helping his warriors free themselves. There was no laughter now, only a grudging respect in his posture. "You made fools of trained warriors using children's toys." "No, General. We used physics, chemistry, and an understanding of your species' biology and combat doctrine. The items themselves were just tools. The weapon was knowledge and creativity." Chen gestured to the scattered materials. "Every species in this council has forgotten something important in their rush to develop advanced technology. They've forgotten that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy isn't a gun or a bomb. It's a thinking mind that refuses to accept limitations." Park spoke up, her voice carrying across the facility. "On Earth, we have thousands of years of warfare experience. We fought with sticks and stones, with swords and spears, with guns and bombs, with aircraft and tanks. But more importantly, we fought in every environment imaginable, against enemies with every possible advantage. We've learned to adapt, to innovate, to turn our weaknesses into strengths and our enemies' strengths into weaknesses. That's what humanity offers the Council." Kim added, "And it's not just about combat. The same creativity applies to engineering, medicine, exploration, and problem solving. Humans don't see obstacles. We see challenges waiting to be overcome." Zexthor's colors shifted to a pattern that their translators interpreted as impressed approval. "I begin to understand. You're not asking to be our soldiers. You're offering to be our tactical advisors, our innovation consultants, our creative problem solvers." "Exactly," Chen confirmed. "Give us your hardest problems, your impossible situations, your seemingly useless resources. We'll find solutions that nobody else would even consider." That's the human advantage. Not strength, not speed, not advanced technology, just pure, stubborn, creative refusal to accept that anything is truly useless. The crowd began to murmur, species representatives talking among themselves. The demonstration had clearly challenged their assumptions. Several were examining the materials Chen had used, trying to understand how such simple items had been so effective. One representative, a floating ethereal named Whisper of Dawn, drifted forward. I have a question, Ambassador. You speak of creativity and adaptation, but surely there must be limits. There must be situations where even human ingenuity would fail. Chen smiled. Of course there are limits. We're not claiming to be perfect or invincible. What we're saying is that we'll never stop trying, never stop innovating, never accept that a problem is unsolvable. Sometimes we'll fail, but we'll fail while learning, adapting, and preparing for the next attempt. That persistence, that refusal to give up, that's as much a part of human nature as our creativity. Another voice called out from the crowd. But what about large-scale warfare? Surely rubber bands and soap won't defeat a fleet of warships. Park answered this time. You're right, but the principles remain the same. It's about finding the unexpected angle, the overlooked vulnerability, the unconventional approach. Human military history is full of examples where smaller, weaker forces defeated larger, stronger ones through creativity and unorthodox tactics. We're not saying we'll win every battle. We're saying we'll find ways to win battles that everyone else thinks are unwinnable. Krathtok had been silent, watching his warriors clean themselves up. Finally, he spoke. I fought in the Stellar Wars, 20 cycles of brutal conflict against an enemy that outgunned us at every turn. We lost 3 entire battle groups before we finally achieved victory through attrition and superior firepower. If humans had been our tactical advisors, how many lives might we have saved? How much faster might we have won? He turned to face Zexthor. High Arbiter, I reverse my position. Humanity should be granted military alliance status immediately, not as soldiers, but as what Ambassador Chen suggested, tactical advisors and creative consultants. Their way of thinking could revolutionize how we approach conflict. Other voices joined in, species representatives who had been skeptical now expressing interest. The tide had turned. What had started as an impossible challenge had become a demonstration that forced the entire council to reconsider their assumptions about humanity. Zexthor raised his crystalline appendages, calling for silence. The council will deliberate on this matter. Ambassador Chen, your demonstration has been most illuminating. However, before we make a final decision, I have one more question. Of course, High Arbiter. This creativity you speak of, this ability to weaponize anything, is it truly universal among humans, or is it limited to specially trained individuals? Chen laughed, a warm sound that echoed in the facility. High Arbiter, what I showed you today was basic human ingenuity. Any human child could have come up with similar solutions. On Earth, we have entire cultures built around the concept of making do with limited resources. We call it various things: jury-rigging, improvisation, thinking outside the box. It's not a special skill, it's just how humans approach problems. Kim stepped forward, pulling out his datapad. If I may, High Arbiter, I'd like to share some historical examples. During one of Earth's global conflicts, human engineers designed and built functional aircraft using wood and fabric because metal was scarce. In another instance, soldiers fashioned armor from salvaged ship parts and cooking equipment. There's a documented case of scientists creating a functional air filter for a spacecraft using duct tape, plastic bags, and cardboard because the original filter had failed and those were the only materials available. Duct tape? Whisper of Dawn asked, the translation program struggling with the term. It's a very sticky, strong, adhesive tape, Park explained. Humans joke that duct tape and willpower can fix anything. But like most human jokes, there's truth beneath the humor. We really do solve critical problems with the most basic materials, simply because we refuse to accept that a problem can't be solved. Zexthor's colors cycled through patterns too complex for the translator to interpret. Finally, he spoke. The council will adjourn to deliberate. Ambassador Chen, Your team should return to your quarters. We will summon you when we have reached a decision. As the human team gathered their materials and prepared to leave, species representatives approached them from all sides. Some wanted to examine the improvised weapons up close. Others had questions about human history and tactics. Still others wanted to discuss potential collaboration on their own problems and challenges. Krothtok approached Chen directly. Ambassador, regardless of the Council's decision, I would like to invite you to visit the Vraxian Military Academy. Our tactical instructors could learn much from human perspectives. I would be honored, General, Chen replied. As they walked back to their quarters, Kim said quietly, You know they're probably going to accept now. Chen nodded. Maybe, but that wasn't really the point. Park raised an eyebrow. It wasn't? The point was to make them think differently. Even if they reject our application, we've planted seeds of doubt about their assumptions. We've shown them that their way isn't the only way. That's worth more than any formal alliance. In their quarters, the team began discussing what might come next. They reviewed the demonstration, noting what had worked well and what could be improved. They were so focused on their analysis that they almost missed the summons when it came, just 3 hours after they'd left the training facility. They returned to the council chamber to find it packed with representatives. Every species seemed to have sent additional observers. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Zexthor stood at the center, his crystalline form glowing brightly. Ambassador Chen, Captain Park, Dr. Kim, please step forward. They approached, and Chen noticed that the other representatives were watching them with a mix of curiosity, respect, and even a bit of wariness that hadn't been there before. The council has deliberated, Zexthor announced. We have reviewed your demonstration, discussed its implications, and considered the potential benefits of human integration into our defensive networks. The vote was not unanimous, but a clear majority has emerged. Chen waited, keeping his expression neutral. He'd learned long ago that in diplomacy, showing too much emotion before hearing the full decision was a mistake. It is the decision of this council that humanity be granted provisional military alliance status. This status will include the right to participate in defensive planning, access to tactical information, and the ability to provide advisory services to member species. However, this status comes with conditions. We're listening, High Arbiter, Chen said. First, human advisors must undergo training in galactic law and the customs of member species. We cannot have well-meaning suggestions that violate cultural taboos or legal restrictions. Second, all human tactical advice must be reviewed by species commanders before implementation. We respect your creativity, but ultimate authority must remain with those who command our forces. Third, this provisional status will be reviewed after one galactic cycle. If the Council is satisfied with human contributions, full alliance status will be granted. Chen glanced at Park and Kim. They both gave subtle nods. The conditions were reasonable, even generous given how skeptical the Council had been just a day ago. The human delegation accepts these terms, High Arbiter, Chen said formally. We pledge to honor the laws and customs of all member species, to provide our best advice while respecting the authority of your commanders, and to prove ourselves worthy of full alliance status within the designated time period. Zexthor's colors brightened. Then it is done. Welcome to the Galactic Defense Initiative, humanity. May your creativity and persistence serve the cause of peace and security for all civilized species. The chamber erupted in a mix of sounds that the translators rendered as applause, though it came in forms ranging from traditional clapping to sonic pulses to bioluminescent displays. The human team maintained their dignified composure, but Chen felt a surge of pride. They'd done it, against all odds, using nothing but rubber bands, soap, and human ingenuity. They'd earned humanity's place among the stars. As the formal ceremony concluded and representatives began to approach with congratulations and questions, Krothtok made his way to Chen's side. Ambassador, I must know, did you truly believe you could succeed, or was this an elaborate bluff? Chen smiled. General, I'll share a secret with you. Every human operation is part planning, part improvisation, and part faith that when things inevitably go wrong, we'll figure something out. That's not a bluff, that's just how we live. The Vraxian general's mandibles clicked in what Chen had learned to recognize as laughter. Then perhaps we have even more to learn from humanity than I thought. Over the following weeks, the human team found themselves in constant demand. Species after species approached them with problems they'd struggled to solve. Some were military challenges, but others were engineering problems, logistical nightmares, or social issues that required fresh perspectives. Chen, Park, and Kim worked alongside newly arrived human specialists to provide advice, suggest alternatives, and demonstrate human problem-solving approaches. One memorable consultation involved a Keltorian mining operation that had been stalled for months because their advanced drilling equipment couldn't penetrate a particular type of rock formation without causing dangerous fractures. The human solution involved studying Earth's history of quarrying and suggesting a combination of thermal expansion and carefully placed low-yield explosives, techniques the Keltorians had considered too primitive to work. When the method succeeded beyond expectations, the Keltorian engineers requested a complete review of their operations to find other places where primitive, human techniques might prove superior to advanced technology. Another consultation involved a diplomatic stalemate between two species who communicated through entirely different sensory modalities. The humans suggested using a third species as interpreters and creating a shared symbolic language that neither party considered their own, thus avoiding issues of cultural dominance. The solution was so obvious in retrospect that both species wondered why they hadn't thought of it themselves. That, the humans explained, was the value of an outside perspective. But it was in military applications that human creativity truly shined. Park led a series of tactical seminars at various military academies, teaching alien officers to think beyond their standard doctrines. She introduced concepts like asymmetric warfare, force multiplication through terrain and timing, and the psychological aspects of combat. Many of the ideas seemed almost philosophical rather than tactical, but when applied to simulated scenarios, they produced results that impressed even skeptical military traditionalists. Kim, meanwhile, worked with scientists and engineers across multiple species. He demonstrated how humans approached research and development with a practical, iterative mindset rather than seeking perfect solutions before implementation. This good enough for now, better later approach was initially met with resistance from species that prized elegance and perfection in their designs. But when human-inspired prototypes went from concept to functional testing in a fraction of the usual time, attitudes began to shift. Chen coordinated everything, serving as the bridge between human thinking and galactic culture. He learned quickly which approaches worked with which species, how to present unconventional ideas in ways that didn't threaten or offend, and when to push for radical changes versus incremental improvements. His diplomatic skills, combined with his willingness to demonstrate human methods through practical examples, earned him respect across the council. The defining moment came 6 months into their provisional status. A crisis emerged at the Galactic Rim, where a member species faced an invasion from an extragalactic force. The invaders used technology that was incompatible with standard galactic defenses. Energy shields didn't stop their weapons. Conventional tactics failed against their fluid, unpredictable strategies. 3 defensive fleets had been badly mauled, and panic was spreading through the council. An emergency session was called. Military leaders from across the galaxy gathered to discuss options, and for the first time, humans were invited to participate as full members of the Strategic Planning Committee rather than as advisors. Chen, Park, and Kim found themselves in a virtual conference with some of the greatest military minds in known space. The situation is dire, Admiral Thexcora of the Stellar Navy explained. Her holographic form showed signs of exhaustion. We've analyzed their technology and found no conventional countermeasures. Their weapons phase through our shields. Their ships maneuver in ways that violate our understanding of physics. Our forces are in retreat. Screens showed footage of the battles. The extragalactic ships were indeed strange, moving with an fluid grace that seemed impossible for their size. Their weapons appeared to bend space itself, bypassing shields and armor to strike at ship interiors directly. "What have you tried?" Park asked, studying the footage intently. Krathtok, who had become humanity's strongest advocate in the military sphere, answered, "Everything in our tactical database. Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, coordinated fleet actions, defensive formations. Nothing works. They adapt too quickly, and their technology seems designed to counter everything we have." Chen leaned forward, watching the alien ships move. Something about their motion patterns seemed familiar, though he couldn't immediately place why. "Show me more footage, especially any instances where they took damage or showed vulnerability." The holographic displays shifted, showing various battle scenes. In most, the galactic forces were clearly losing, but occasionally there were moments where the alien ships seemed to hesitate or withdraw. Chen watched these moments carefully. "There," he said, pointing to one scene. "That Keltorian cruiser fired a salvo of missiles. The alien ship dodged them easily, but look at the course it took. It avoided the missiles by a huge margin, much more than necessary." Park saw it too. They're not just dodging, they're staying far away from the missiles even when they're clearly not a threat. "Show me other instances of missile fire." More footage played, and the pattern became clear. The alien ships treated physical projectiles with much more caution than they did energy weapons. When faced with missiles or kinetic rounds, they maneuvered aggressively, sometimes even retreating temporarily, but energy weapons barely seemed to concern them. Kim pulled up data on the alien ship movements. "Look at this. Their maneuvering doesn't actually violate physics. It just violates the physics of conventional propulsion. They're not using thrust-based movement. It's more like they're falling in directions they choose, manipulating local gravity or space-time curvature. Which means they can't easily change direction if they misjudge a trajectory," Park said, her eyes lighting up. "They're incredibly agile in planned maneuvers, but terrible at responding to unexpected physical obstacles." Chen felt pieces clicking together in his mind. They're like water flowing around rocks, smooth, graceful, but fundamentally reactive. They can phase through energy shields because they're working on a different dimensional axis, but they can't phase through solid matter. "Can we exploit that?" Vexcora asked. Park was already sketching tactical diagrams. "Yes, but not with missiles the way we've been using them. Missiles are predictable, easy to dodge. We need to create physical obstacles in space that they can't avoid. We need to make them choose between bad options instead of reacting to direct attacks." Kim nodded excitedly. "We could deploy debris fields, not as weapons but as terrain. Use conventional explosives to create clouds of shrapnel that force them into specific vectors. Then hit them with massed kinetic fire while their movement options are constrained." "That's insane," someone objected. "We'd be giving up our main advantages in speed and firepower to play games with space debris." "No," Krathtok said slowly, understanding dawning in his voice. "We'd be turning space itself into a weapon, making the battlefield work for us instead of just being an empty arena for ship-to-ship combat." Chen outlined the strategy more formally. "We use expendable drones to deploy field after field of physical obstacles. Simple, stupid, cheap obstacles that their sophisticated technology can't phase through. We turn large areas of space into three-dimensional mazes where their superior maneuverability becomes a liability because they have to avoid so many physical objects. Then we use conventional weapons, the kind they've been ignoring, to attack them when they're constrained by the terrain we've created. The conference room fell silent as the assembled military leaders considered this. It was completely contrary to standard galactic warfare doctrine, which emphasized clear fields of fire and unobstructed movement. The humans were suggesting they deliberately clutter the battlefield with junk. "It's like your demonstration with the Vraxian warriors," Whisper of Dawn observed. "You're not trying to overcome their advantages directly. You're changing the nature of the engagement to favor your own capabilities." "Exactly," Park confirmed. "And the beauty of it is that it doesn't require new technology or advanced weapons. It just requires rethinking how we use the resources we already have." Admiral Thex Cora studied the tactical projections Kim had put together. "This could work. It's unlike anything in our military history, but that's precisely why it might succeed. They've adapted to counter our conventional approaches. This is anything but conventional." "We'll need to move quickly," Park cautioned. "Once they see what we're doing, they'll adapt. This strategy might only work once, so we need to make it count." Krathtok stood, his forearms spread in a gesture of determination. "Then let us make it count. I volunteer to lead the assault force." "As do I," Thex Cora added. Others joined in, species that had been rivals setting aside their differences to face the extragalactic threat with human-inspired tactics. The plan came together over the next 48 hours. Every available ship, from military cruisers to civilian freighters, was drafted into service. The military vessels would do the fighting, but the civilian ships had an equally important role, deploying the obstacles. The humans suggested using whatever was available: scrap metal, construction debris, decommissioned satellites, even frozen water and carbon dioxide in large chunks. The goal wasn't to damage enemy ships directly, but to create a three-dimensional minefield of objects that couldn't be phased through and would shred any ship that collided with them at high speed. Park worked with fleet commanders to design the deployment pattern. The obstacles would be arranged in layers, forcing the alien ships into predictable evasion patterns. At key points, galactic warships would be waiting with conventional kinetic weapons, railguns, missile batteries, and even old-fashioned explosive rounds that most species had phased out decades ago in favor of energy weapons. Kim coordinated the technical aspects, ensuring that the debris fields would persist long enough to be effective, but could be cleared afterward to avoid creating permanent hazards to navigation. He also worked with sensor specialists to track enemy ships through the obstacle-filled space. No easy task when visibility was intentionally impaired. Chen handled the diplomatic and logistical challenges, securing resources and permissions from species across the galaxy. Many were skeptical, but the growing desperation of the situation, combined with humanity's proven track record of creative problem-solving, convinced them to try. The fleet assembled at the edge of the conflict zone. It was the largest coordinated military operation in galactic history, with hundreds of ships from dozens of species working together under a unified command. The fact that this unity had been inspired by humanity's unorthodox thinking was not lost on anyone involved. "All ships, this is Admiral Thex Cora," the fleet commander's voice echoed across communication channels. "Today we fight not with the newest weapons or the most advanced technology. Today we fight with creativity, determination, and the will to protect our homes using whatever means necessary. Today we fight like humans. All units execute deployment." The civilian vessels moved first, spreading out in a coordinated pattern. From their cargo bays, they released thousands of tons of debris. The material spread through space in carefully calculated trajectories, creating an expanding web of physical obstacles. Sensor readouts showed the debris field growing, layer upon layer of hazards that the alien ships would have to navigate. The extragalactic vessels detected the activity and moved to intercept. They'd learned to treat galactic forces with contempt, having won every previous engagement with ease. As they approached, their formations were loose, almost casual. They expected another easy victory. That overconfidence was exactly what the humans had counted on. The alien ships entered the debris field at high speed, their superior maneuverability allowing them to weave between obstacles with grace. But the field kept getting denser. What had seemed like a nuisance became a challenge, then became a threat. Ships that had been moving in coordinated formations had to split apart to navigate the obstacles independently. Phase 2, Thexcora commanded. Tighten the net. More civilian vessels released their cargoes, filling the gaps in the debris field. The alien ships found their maneuvering room shrinking rapidly. They tried to withdraw, but the field had expanded behind them as well. They were being corralled, forced into increasingly predictable paths by the simple presence of physical objects they couldn't phase through. Now, Krathtok transmitted, all weapons fire at will. Galactic warships that had been positioned at key points throughout the debris field opened up with every kinetic weapon in their arsenals. Railgun slugs, missiles, explosive shells, even simple steel balls accelerated to high velocities. The aliens tried to dodge, but with their movement options limited by debris, they couldn't evade everything. Impacts began registering across the enemy fleet. The aliens attempted to return fire with their phasing weapons, but the same debris that constrained their movement also interfered with their targeting. Their sophisticated weapons systems weren't designed to track through fields of physical obstacles. The humans had turned the aliens' own technological sophistication against them. But the extra galactic force wasn't defeated yet. They began adapting, using their weapons to clear paths through the debris field. Progress was slow, each cleared path requiring concentrated fire that left them vulnerable to galactic counterattacks, but they were making headway. Park had anticipated this. Phase 3 collapsed the pocket. Automated drones that had been seeded throughout the debris field activated. They weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were simply powerful directional charges that, when detonated, compressed the debris field inward. The alien ships, already struggling to navigate, suddenly found the density of obstacles increasing exponentially around them. Several collided with debris, their hulls torn open by impacts at velocities their armor couldn't withstand. The remaining alien ships panicked. Their fluid, graceful movements became desperate and erratic. They fired wildly, trying to clear paths to escape. But every path they cleared was immediately filled by more debris pushed by the continuing explosions. It was like trying to swim through an avalanche. Galactic forces pressed the attack. With the enemy disorganized and trapped, conventional weapons proved devastatingly effective. Ship after ship fell to kinetic bombardment. Those that tried to push through the debris field at high speed were shredded. Those that slowed to navigate carefully became easy targets. In less than an hour, it was over. The extragalactic fleet was destroyed or in full retreat. Galactic forces had won the most decisive victory in the war so far, and they'd done it using tactics that would have been considered primitive or even laughable before humans arrived on the scene. The fleet regrouped beyond the debris field, crews celebrating their survival and victory. But already Park was working with commanders to document every detail of the engagement. This tactic had worked once, but the aliens would adapt. Next time they'd need something different, another creative approach that turned perceived weaknesses into strengths. Chen stood in the command center of Thexcora's flagship, watching the celebration around him. Species that had been skeptical of humanity just months ago were now asking for more human tactical advisors, more human innovation consultants, more human perspectives on their problems. Krathtok approached, his warrior's armor still showing scars from the battle. Ambassador Chen, the Vraxian High Command has asked me to extend a formal request. We want to establish a joint military academy with humanity, a place where our best warriors can learn your ways of thinking and where your people can learn our combat traditions. I'll bring the proposal to my government, Chen replied. I think they'll be very interested. Thexcora joined them, her exhaustion evident but her spirits high. The council will be convening to review humanity's provisional status, After today's victory, I suspect the vote for full alliance will be unanimous. Chen smiled. We appreciate that, Admiral, but I hope the Council understands that today wasn't about proving humans are better than anyone else. It was about showing what's possible when you think differently, when you refuse to accept that limitations are absolute. Oh, I think they understand that now, Whisper of Dawn said, floating over to join the conversation. The question is whether they're ready for what comes next. You've shown us that our assumptions about warfare, about problem solving, about what makes a weapon or a tool were far too narrow. That's going to have implications far beyond the military sphere. Kim, who had been monitoring the post-battle analysis, called out, Ambassador, you need to see this. The debris field we created, the sensor data is showing some interesting secondary effects. Several species are asking if we can adapt the technique for peaceful purposes, creating navigation hazards to protect restricted areas, or using similar principles for asteroid mining operations. Park added, and I've got 3 requests for tactical seminars, 5 proposals for joint training operations, and someone from the Kaltorian Science Institute asking if humans would be interested in collaborating on a radical rethinking of their approach to physics research. Chen laughed. I guess we'd better request more personnel from Earth. It seems humanity is going to be very busy in the foreseeable future. As the fleet began its journey back to Council space, Chen took a moment to compose a message for Earth. He described the battle, the victory, and the implications. But more than that, he tried to capture what this all meant for humanity's place in the galaxy. We didn't win through superior strength or advanced technology, he wrote. We won because we saw possibilities others missed. We turned trash into terrain, limitations into advantages, and conventional wisdom into obsolete assumptions. This is what humanity can offer the galaxy, not just solutions to specific problems, but a fundamental shift in how problems are approached. We've shown them that the phrase, "it can't be done," is really just an invitation to prove otherwise, and that more than any weapon or technology is what will secure humanity's future among the stars. The message transmitted, Chen turned back to his team. There was work to do, meetings to attend, proposals to review. But in this moment, he allowed himself to feel satisfied. They'd achieved what many thought impossible, not through force or deception, but through the most human of traits. The stubborn refusal to accept that anything is truly useless, that any challenge is truly insurmountable, that any situation is truly hopeless. As long as a human mind could observe, analyze, and imagine, there would always be another approach to try, another angle to exploit, another way to turn the useless into the indispensable.